Joining me right now is Michael Fields with Colorado Rising Action, who is helping defend the taxpayer Bill of Rights. Michael, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Good. How are you, Jeff?
Good. Well, listen, this isn't going according to the plan for the left, I noticed. Of course, this ballot measure put on the ballot. Tell folks it's on this year's ballot, and
That's
people
right.
need to understand that. It's not 2020, right?
No.
Yes.
2019, yeah.
2019. And the legislators put it on the ballot, trying to get more money so that for their insatiable appetite to fund government, get it put on this year's ballot, and then they started polling it. And I think they found out that it wasn't polling quite as well as they had hoped. So now, and this is just so amazing, but now they're trying to change the name and they want to remove any reference to the Taxpayer Bill of Rights from the repeal question and instead refer to it as Article 10, Section 20 of the state constitution. Now, I talked about this briefly earlier this morning. To me, that is nothing more than trying to trick voters. I mean, do you see it any other way?
No, I don't. And really, there's two things going on. So one, there's this ballot issue trying to take your TABOR refunds forever on this year's ballot. And that is happening, what you were talking about is happening for next year's ballot
Right.
for a full repeal of TABOR.
Right.
Because, if you talk about TABOR, if you say the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, if you let people know what's actually going on, they'll definitely vote against it. And so you really have them doing two things in terms of trickery. One, this year, the ballot issue says, without raising taxes to better fund roads and education within a balanced budget. I mean, they really, with an audit, they really go after the ballot language in this year's ballot one. And then next year, as you mentioned, they didn't even want to reference TABOR. They said everybody knows what section. I don't even know what it is.
Right.
I think Doug Bruce is probably the only person that does. And the funny thing was, Carol Hedges, who's pushing this full repeal ballot issue, wrote an op-ed 2 days later after she was arguing this, all references to TABOR in that op-ed, not one reference to the section and title of it. So they know that they're making stuff up here, but they want to hide from the voters what they're actually trying to do.
Well, and a great point to clarify. I guess I smushed them together there. I didn't mean to do that, but thank you for correcting me. So the TABOR repeal attempt that we're talking about here is a 2020 effort.
Yes. But
before we get to that, we've got to fight this CC question that's on the ballot in 2019. So your organization is doing that. But let's talk about what CC does so people understand what the purpose of this is and why the legislature is doing it.
Yes, the legislature, obviously they overreached enormously this year. I was down in Colorado Springs a couple of days ago and talking to some people. I said, how many people think the legislature overreached? And every hand in the room, of course, went up. They want more money to overreach. And basically what Prop CC does is right now we have within our TABOR formula, it's population plus inflation growth. It's been going on that way since 1992. It's done really well for us, that formula. But if it goes above that TABOR cap, we get refunds. And so that's where we're at right now. Is we're projected to have 3 straight years, at least, of refunds that we would get, $1.3 billion that would come back to us because government is growing faster than it needs to be. And what they want to do is permanently take away those TABOR refunds. If you remember Ref C, it was a 5-year timeout, big battle here in Colorado, and it narrowly passed. Well, this would permanently do that and really grow government much more than it is right now, even though it's growing by over $1 billion a year. But they don't want to send that money back to you. And so, what we're out there is trying to educate people because the ballot language doesn't sound like that. It doesn't ask, can we take your refund money that'll be, billions of dollars in these upcoming years? They say, without raising taxes, can we retain the money for these things that people really do genuinely want, improved education and roads. The problem is the legislature isn't prioritizing those things and hasn't been for years.
Yeah, this is a legislature that a few years ago expanded Medicaid, made those decisions, and now then comes back and says, well, gosh, we just don't have enough money to do all this for roads. Well, of course you don't, because you've been spending it recklessly in other places. So what are the polls showing on CC?
So basically, you have the reason I'm worried is because of the ballot language on it.
Right.
I was sitting down and showed my wife it. Who's not very political. It's like, that sounds great. That looks really good. Once people really realize, they focus group this and explain it to people. Once you explain that they're taking away your refunds, they haven't prioritized these things in the past. The state budget's growing. It doesn't do very well. But if people aren't educated about it, if they don't know what's on this year's ballot or which question it is, et cetera, there's a chance that it passes. So right now, I've seen a bunch of different polls on it, but it's hovering around a little under 50%, which isn't good for a ballot issue if you want to pass it. The problem is our side, the opposition's only in the mid-30s. And so it's kind of like you don't want to be either side right now on it. It's a rush to who can educate people about what this means. And so I think we will defeat this thing if we can get the word out. And that's why I'm going on the radio and talking to different people and going to Republican groups to say, look, you actually need to put the work in, because if people just read this ballot language, don't hear anything else, there's a chance it could pass.
Yeah, there is. Colorado Rising Action is doing great work trying to educate folks. I know Americans for Prosperity is working as well to try and educate folks on CC and why we should vote against it. I think both of these, this and the repeal effort in 2020, are so dishonest, and that's what I think people should really be offended by. I mean, it's not just that they're trying to reach into your pocket, it's that they're trying to trick you into voting for something so that they can, like, you'll give them permission to reach into your pocket. And that's what's so terrible, I think, and insidious about this, is they aren't even being honest about it up front. It'd be one thing if they said, hey, look, we want to take your refund and spend it here, but that's not what they're doing. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think they think that voters aren't smart enough, or they need to trick them in order to get their way on it, because the taper is very popular. If you ask, do you want that right to vote on tax increases, and do you think government should be limited to population plus inflation? Both sides of that are pretty popular. If you give people that information straight, they want to get around it the same way they try to get around it through fees and enterprises. They just hate Tabor and want any way to go after it. You look at, I think the ultimate goal is that full repeal. And Prop CC is a big deal this year, especially because they want momentum. They can say, if we can win this, then we'll dump more money in on the next thing, and then we have a progressive income tax after that. They have a whole roadmap for this. But if you can stop this first thing and say, even with this dishonest ballot language, even with, just taking the refund money, if you can't pass that, you're not going to be able to do the rest of your plan. And so that's, kind of how we're looking at this, is a least, less expensive way to really defeat that long-term plan to raise taxes and to turn us into a state like where I grew up, Illinois, where they just raise taxes whenever they want. People are leaving in droves, out of Illinois. Their credit rating's terrible. I'm really passionate about Tabor because I think tax policy matters. I think us having a vote matters, and it's really saved us from becoming like these other states that have gone down since the recession.
Yeah, it really has. It's the thing that keeps us from becoming California, I think, keeps us from becoming any of these states that, as you're right, can just go in, the legislature goes in, they have a big budget deficit, they just raise taxes, and, it's different here. And that's why people like living in Colorado and why people are moving to Colorado. Just got a couple of seconds left, but I want to ask, how can folks know more about Colorado Rising Action?
So ColoradoRisingAction.org. We have information about Tabor, the other issues that we're working on. There's an important 2020 is going to be so important across the board, but 2019 comes first. So we'll make sure everybody votes, everybody tells their neighbors about this ballot issue, and we need to build some momentum on our side. We lost a lot in 2018, but this is how we start fighting our way back.
All right, great. Thank you, Michael Fields, Executive Director of Colorado Rising Action. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. We'll be right back on The Jeff Crank Show.